Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is our bi-monthly or every other month webinar. We pick different topics. We try to be as relevant as we can in terms of what's happening in the marketplace and what our clients and future clients are really concerned about. This one came to my attention. This particular topic came to my attention after I read one particular article, and the term psychological safety, it's not a touchy-feely topic as much as it's a culture building topic for leadership. And how do you engage and create an environment where people feel more engaged? So I'm going to dive in here. We will be sharing the recording of this with everyone, and we'll also share a PDF version of the PowerPoint. So if you want to take notes, feel free, but we will be sure to share the notes with you. There's going to be four main topics, talking points today. It's really, first of all, let's understand what psychological safety is. All right, Laura, you might have muted me by accident there. Hopefully you can still hear me. Building trust and open communication, how important that is to psychological safety, encouraging diverse perspectives, and that's inclusion of thoughts and ideas. And then how do we deal with mistakes? They happen all the time. It's a normal part of running a business, but how do we make sure that we handle those well? So those are our main topics for today. Let's first, talk about what psychological safety is, or what the definition of it is. And it was initially coined or phrased by Amy Edmondson, who's a professor at the Harvard Business School. This goes back some time. And so it's not a new concept, but it's something today that I think we have to think about, especially with the diversity of the workforce we have today, different generations, different styles, different approaches, different cultures, all coming together. And it's a real big mix these days. So we have to make sure that people feel safe. And the idea, it's about creating an environment where people can speak up, right? Meaning they can share their thoughts or ideas, their concerns. And it's not, I don't want to get too deep into specifics, but the idea is we want to create that environment, not so people can bitch and moan. It's more about people having genuine concerns around the development and growth of the business, improvement, those sorts of things, and a free exchange. And without it, without having that, it does shut down innovation and collaboration, and it can lead to lower levels of employee satisfaction. And when I think about employee satisfaction, the term employee engagement always comes to mind. Engagement in itself, that's a term that was developed a bunch of years ago. The Gallup organization has done various surveys on what that really means, but there's the actively disengaged, the engaged, and fully engaged types. And we have to make sure that we are creating better engagement so that people feel committed to the goal, the results, being part of a team, rather than compliance, which is really doing it because the boss said it needs to be done, or it's part of the process in itself. There's always a means to the end, all right? But the end, the goal, people need to be connected to that. There was a study done a bunch of years ago, and it's probably ongoing. I haven't looked it up recently, but a survey organization called 4C, and they mapped employee engagement levels with customer retention levels. And there was a direct correlation to how high if the employee engagement numbers were higher, the customer retention numbers were higher. Really interesting study. If you're interested in more, I will look it up again. But I've used that in a number of my talks around employee engagement. So let's talk about the impact of psychological safety, which I touched on, but there's a lot of positive impacts. If you think about every single organization, we have departments, we have, also known as silos, functional areas. We have teams that cut across silos. We have special team, project teams, all sorts of teams, and we know with everything we've learned that the power of a team and an organization is critical. The collaboration, the creativity. Some of the best and most innovative companies work very aggressively on team. How well are we functioning? Whether it's a leadership team, a project team, the effectiveness of that team drives creativity, innovation, and essentially long-term success for the business. So we have to make sure we're thinking about this, relative to all the aspects of how a company works. You've got your value chain of the business. The value chain is, you might have a marketing team, a sales team, an engineering team, a production team. I'm giving you an example of a manufacturing company, a logistics team to move the product. That is your value chain. If you understand the aspects of how that really works, it's all in the handoffs. The stronger the collaboration within the departments or the silos and how they function together creates a much more effective organization that's always thinking about how to succeed in the long run and grow and be successful long term. It also psychological safety also boosts the individual well-being, right? How people feel about coming to work, and I use the word feel intentionally. It's the experience. When we've all been through this, we go to a movie and on the big screen, let's say, and we're going to feel some sort of experience. We go to a live sporting event, we feel an experience, and it's not any different. It may not be as as big a production as a NFL Super Bowl perhaps, but it is a production, and the question is, do people feel effective? Do they feel good about themselves? Do they feel like are they enjoying their job in spite of all the challenges we have? I mean, it's a very normal thing. And so in the long run, if we get people feeling good about themselves, feeling good about being part of a team, it does drive the overall performance. I read another study recently around people within an organization, and one of the biggest retention tools is how good they feel about being part of a team. And the study went further to say even when they had opportunity to leave for more money, they didn't, because of the dynamics and the sense of belonging in a strong and effective team. So we have to really think about that. The negative side, obviously, is real. And if people don't feel psychologically safe, they're not speaking up, they're not challenging one another, they're not driving accountability within a team. It does slow down innovation. So if people don't feel that it's okay to speak up or challenge or to express concern, it does shut them down, and that will, over time, it does burn people out. We talk about burnout. Burnout is not just feeling overworked. It's also it's not feeling progress, or not feeling the ability to have an impact, or not feeling part of something. That creates a lot of stress, and eventually most people will decide to leave. Now, I'm hopeful, and I'm sure everyone on the call here has experienced this sort of thing themselves, or they've seen it. And I'm sure your organization is probably very healthy, but we've always got to work on this. There's lots of things that can change quickly that will change that feeling. All right, so let me just talk a little bit about recognizing it. It is important that we recognize the psychological safety aspects, and because if we don't know how to deal with it. We got to make sure that we're looking at things, looking for the positive signs. I'll ask an organization, "How's your team performing? How's the company performing? How do your people feel?" And they'll give me answers. And my question back always is, "What's the evidence that supports that? What do you see? What are you experiencing? What are you seeing?" Right? So we're looking for people who do share openly. They're willing to speak up, whether it's in a group setting or one-on-one or with you as the leader. Are they willing to challenge you? And it's a good litmus test for you. People trusting and respecting other, very important. Obviously, that's a foundation piece. We're going to talk more about trust in just a minute. But we got to see, do you sense there's a high degree of trust within your team or within your organization? And if you're someone who lives at the top of the food chain of your business, meaning you're a more senior leader in the company, you should look beyond your team. You should look cross-functionally as well. Is there good, healthy communication across the board? Let's just see here. Hold on. Oh, okay. Sorry, Lori. Lori added a comment there about adding questions. If you have any questions, please add them in the chat area, just as a reminder. Signs of an unsafe environment or people not feeling psychologically safe. People won't speak up because they're fearful that they might be potentially ridiculed, or they may be their ideas may not be considered. So we want to make sure that we are looking for that. If you think about the entire population of your team or the people around you, different styles, different approaches. We want people to take a certain amount of risk, obviously, and risk is all relative to your business. Of course, it's not the same across every business, but we want to be sure people are willing to take some risk, either and I mean calculated risk in their decision making, their willingness to step up, their willingness to be innovative. So we're not seeing a good, healthy exchange of ideas across the organization. There's always going to be the ones that speak up all the time, the loudest voices. We're not worried about those. We're worried about others. So let's make sure that we are seeing that. And if you're recognizing that there's pretty broad discussion across your team on a consistent basis, you're probably doing quite well. All right, let's keep going here. So let's talk about trust as a foundation of psychological safety. And trust is one of those things. I do a lot of work on trust when I'm working with my leaders in different organizations, training, coaching. Trust is one of those things that is kind of difficult to put your finger on. Most people say, well, it's sort of a feeling, and it is. But that feeling or that measurement of trust that you have with an individual, another person, or people around you, or teams of people, is a function of their experience. And trust in itself is there are really three pieces to trust. How we drive trust up and down with our relationships. It's through three things: competence. Are you competent in what you do? Are you delivering as promised? Are you consistent? Are you accountable to outcomes? We have integrity, which is your set of guiding principles and values that drive you, that affect your behavior. And then compassion, meaning, do you consider others' needs in the course of your everyday? Are you thinking about not just yourself and your priorities, but also how your priorities can affect others? And your behaviors in those three areas will create an experience for others to know, can I trust this person? It works in both directions, obviously, but this is a big thing. So are you creating, as a leader, are you creating an environment that drives trust in the organization? So a big part of this is the second point here: fostering open communication and dialogue. And if we think about how we communicate, communication might seem like a very simple concept. Send an email, have a conversation, hold a meeting. Yeah, there's tremendous amount of communication going there. But that experience, do people feel heard themselves? Do they feel valued in the conversation? Or in some cases, they may not really feel validated in what they're doing, how they're doing it, and sharing ideas, or at least trying to drive an agenda themselves. And I don't mean a bad agenda. I mean an agenda that is leading to positive organizational outcomes, results. So let's just talk a little bit about what leaders can do in the course of their time to create that environment. And I think one of the big ones is start with yourself, right? Let's start with your ability to demonstrate, essentially leading by example. Are you showing vulnerability? And what I mean by that is taking responsibility. We all learn from are mistakes? Are you owning up to mistakes? Are you owning up to your responsibilities? And I mean in a demonstrable fashion. Do people see it? Do they feel it? And a great example of this is, and I will see this at times, where a leader is faced with a challenge, meaning one of their team members has made an error. And there's a lot of downward pressure from, say, senior management in this case. What should the leader do in this case? And their job is to give air cover to their employee who may have made the mistake or may have contributed to the error. It is their job to protect the employee, to say, no, that's on my watch. That error occurred because of my leadership. I will address it. Now, if the employee is a challenge, that doesn't mean you don't go and talk to them and figure out what happened. But they have to feel that you've got their back. And I've seen cases where the manager has left the employee out to dry to a certain degree, and that's a massive, massive error. That will create an environment where people are thinking, okay, I can't make mistakes. I've got to protect myself, and I don't have the air cover from my boss who's going to help me get through this when we make mistakes, because everybody does. So we got to make sure that's happening. And then the transparency comment there is really about being transparent in what's going well, what's happening in the business, what's not going well, how people are feeling. We got to be as transparent as possible to eliminate as much ambiguity. And there's a ton of ambiguity in organizations, a lot more than you think there is. So we've got to try to eliminate it, or as a minimum, just minimize it so people have greater understanding of expectations, results, what their profile for success looks like. So let's talk a little bit about some strategies that will help with that. I think the active listening and empathy piece is important. We do forget about this, and what I mean by that is, as leaders in an organization, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on you, leaders and managers, to achieve, to make sure the goals and objectives of your team are achieved in a timely fashion, oftentimes within budget. And that drive to succeed is a good thing, but we can't forget that in the process of making sure that we are achieving that, it is not just you, it's the people around you, and all your employees, your team members have needs, wants, desires. They're also thinking in that context. So we can't ignore that fact. We also want to be sure that we are listening for what's really going on. Oftentimes, employees may have a difficult time expressing themselves, getting out what their challenges may be. So it's not coddling. I don't want to send that message, but I think we have to ensure that people feel heard in the process of building, creating, solving problems, dealing with mistakes, that sort of thing, because there are always two sides to a story. We do want to create a safe space and a space for feedback and discussion, and that means you've got to be deliberate with that. If you think about day to day, do you take time to celebrate wins? Do you take time to discuss lessons learned within the business? I would say, if you're saying, yeah, of course we do, but I'm going to guess it's probably not as much as you think, and not enough. Now, it does take extra time, but it's an investment in your team members, and the overall success of the business. And then the third bullet here, demonstrating integrity in decision making. Obviously, as a manager, leader, it is your responsibility to make decisions. You want to be sure that the integrity the decision making comes from a good place, meaning a good set of values, and that's where the integrity word comes in here. Am I making decisions consistently? Am I considering all people, all aspects? Is the decision making affecting others? How will it affect others? So there's a lot that goes on there, and I think we can certainly take. I do believe it's an opportunity to really consider the implications of your decisions, and it might not just be within the team; it could be outside the team. So that's a very important piece. We want to build trust. here are three key strategies that you can consider as you go forward. All right. All right, don't forget, if you have any questions, please jot them down under the chat, and we will hit them at the very end. All right, so let's talk about encouraging diverse perspectives. I don't want to confuse this with DEI. This particular topic is really about perspectives, how people are thinking, ideas. The best innovation comes from different ideas, different ways of doing things. It's not simply just having a brainstorm. It's ensuring that we are drawing people out in a way that certainly encourages them. A great example of this, I mean, you probably have them on your desk, or maybe many of them. We all have sticky notes. And if you're not familiar, and people probably are, but just to remind you, where did the sticky note come from? And it came from a mistake. It came from a failed adhesive at 3M. And one of the employees came up with the idea based on a simple need they had when they were at church. They wanted a place to put it wasn't meant to be sticky notes at the time, but it was meant to be dividers or places to remind people in hymn books or Bibles where and they didn't want to damage the book. I'm probably butchering the story because I haven't read it in a long time, but that's the essence of it. This idea came from a failure, and an employee brought this to leadership and saying, look, this is what I've been using it for. Does it make sense? And 3M created the product and shipped it out to a bunch of companies free of charge just to see if there was a market for it. I guess there's a market for it. Everyone has sticky notes somewhere. I've got a pile over here. So I just want you to think about that. Having a broad range of ideas and solutions can lead to great things. It can be something very small, or certainly something very large. But I think what we want to do is let's ensure that the diversity in our thinking and our ideas and our perspectives and the way to approach things, we're looking at all angles. As leaders, what we will do is we'll often listen to the loudest voice. And I'm not saying the loudest voice doesn't have great ideas. Oftentimes, and this is through my experience, facilitating strategy sessions or working in teams around leadership, is some of the quietest people who don't like to speak up in a public forum or in a meeting setting, struggle with it just because of their style, have some of the greatest ideas. So as leaders, it really is up to us, to you in this case, to think about this. Roughly 50% of the population, and I'm just doing some general math here, roughly 50% of the population, based on their style, just their style alone, how they communicate with others, their motivations, their stressors, they will not speak up until they have an opportunity. And I think, and I would put it on them. It's like, no, you've got to work on it. But if you, as a leader and a manager or team leader, can create this environment where those who are the quietest voices, let's make sure we get all voices on the table. So that, I'm diving into the inclusive practices. And it can be as simple as, in a meeting setting, just really calling people out in a positive way. And when ideas are shared, they should be at least considered, right? This is a deliberate effort. It doesn't mean you have to act on every idea, but if we want people to feel psychologically safe in an environment, we're working at driving that dialogue within a team, within an organization. So we're building, we are driving a lot of ideas. Here's another example. It's kind of on the macro level. You've all heard of the company Toyota. And, going way, way back when their cars were first introduced, they weren't very good. Today, they're some of the most durable and reliable cars on the road today. And a lot of it has to do with their methodology, how they improved. One of the things they did is they actually had suggestion boxes. Now, a lot of companies have suggestion boxes, but don't act on the suggestions. Toyota and likely still today, they act on or validate and give feedback on suggestions, and they work because the employees doing the work are the ones that have probably the greatest knowledge and the greatest value. So you can't underestimate the value of actually listening to people's feedback. And Toyota is a great success example for that. And then, of course, the last point here, encouraging participation from all team members. It's kind of the same thing, but for some, they don't like to be called out in a public setting, so there might be other ways to do that. Engaging people with potentially special projects to go after something, knowing you've got to get to know your people, what their capabilities are, where their strengths lie, and there are different ways to engage people to ensure that they are participating and being part of the operation. So if you think about any team, you're going to have your highest performers, you're going to have your kind of mid-level, good solid B players, if you want to think it, and then you're going to have your laggards or your stragglers. We can't afford the stragglers. They drag us down. So sometimes the stragglers are not because they're not hard workers. They're finding it difficult to connect, to be part of something, maybe just because of their style or how they feel about themselves. So you do have a more significant impact than you might think. All right, let's keep going here. Hopefully you're getting a lot of value out of this. And do remember, I'm going to send you these slides. We'll make sure everyone gets the slides. So let's talk a little bit about some steps to inclusion. And I think, regularly soliciting input from everyone. Like I said, the loudest voices do speak up, but there are some techniques. One of the things you should be doing with your teammates or your team members, your employees, I recommend having a regular cadence of one-on-one meetings with them. And it doesn't have to be a long meeting. It could be a 15-minute check-in, how are things going? But having that regular consistency for the employee is very, very important. Whether they're asking for it or not, it keeps you well connected to that individual, and it gives them the opportunity to share ideas, and it gives you an opportunity to find more about how this person ticks, how they work. And it's not a one-on-one to talk about the business. All right, let's be clear about this. It's not about the business directly, meaning how are things going, what's happening on this project. That happens in other forums. You want to have a one-on-one that talks about the individual, their ideas, their thoughts, their aspirations. And this does it makes people feel included or feel inclusive and valued. And I think that's a big piece. People want to feel valued. Celebrating diversity and differences, that one's a little more challenging depending on your style, your personality. We are all wired, all of us are wired to look for mistakes, to look for the things that aren't working. It is easy to do that because I think it's wired into our DNA, or every organization is saying we need to get better. I mean, if you take a professional sports team, which is a great example of a team, and there's a lot of money at stake. What do? They're looking for what's not working. Here's the plan, here's the play. Did it work? No, it didn't work. But you'll find the best teams in the world, they celebrate what's going well, as much as the differences of how things are working or should be working differently. And I think that's what we got to do. We got to make sure that we say, look, different ideas are a good thing. They're going to drive us forward. They're going to challenge us. The best ideas come from, one or two people. Yeah, certainly individuals can come up with ideas, but how we execute, how we build, how we create, we have to make sure that we're talking about the different ideas and how they do drive innovation and support success with any either team or business, because it's true. We don't see it necessarily. It doesn't stare us in the face, but it's a little more underlying as a function of how things work. We should bring it to the forefront. And then this last point, address and manage biases in decision making. And this one is always interesting to me because as individuals, we do have biases, right? We all do, and they don't have to be considered negative biases, but we do. Whether it's in how we see for instance, if we work in a particular environment and there's certain cultural values, we're going to be biased, and we like it. We're going to be biased to look for that in other environments, and if we compare one environment to the other, we're going to say, well, that one's not good because it doesn't fit my bias viewpoint. So now, does that make the other environment bad? No, it just means you like the one you're in. So we have to remember that. You might have a bias in how people should communicate. You might have a bias in how how you might succeed as a team, or how you might succeed as an organization, as a company. We have biases in the people we like to hang around with, the team members we want on our team. We have biases. So it's not bad to have biases, unless it's destructive, and there are destructive biases out there. I'm talking about good, healthy ones. I'm not saying you should change your biases, but what I would challenge you to think about, especially within a team setting, understand your own biases, right? And recognize that, I might be shutting somebody down, or I might be shutting part of my organization down because my bias is over here. And it's just to recognize that, okay, I have the bias. I really need to be conscious about what that is and make sure that I allow people in, I allow a diversity in thinking, because that bias can shut you down. There's a book that I recommend to all my leaders, and it's called Leadership and Self-Deception. And it's written by the Arbinger Institute. That's that Arbinger, Arbinger Institute. If you haven't read it, it's worth it, because it does speak to how we see the world through our own lens, and how we can be biased in our approach to leading others. Are we creating a good environment? Well, typically our tendency is to want to create a good environment, but are our actions in alignment with what we want to achieve? And oftentimes your biases play against that, and you don't even see it. So are you seeing the situation for what it really is, or are you only seeing it through your own lens, your own paradigm? And that's usually what happens. And this kind of is touching on the term emotional intelligence, which is nothing more than understanding your emotions, how it affects you, and how you conduct yourself in a situation or in an environment to get the best outcome. That's really what we're talking about here. So I know I'm spending a lot of time on the term on biases, but it does have a significant impact on what you do and how you do what you do. All right, let's just see. I think there's another point I wanted to make. Just that you're going to receive a certain amount of feedback, input. If you're doing the right things, you're going to get some bad ideas and some good ideas. I would say try to factor into your mindset. What are the let's not dismiss ideas that you consider to be bad immediately. Validate them. If they come out to be something that's not of value, not in alignment with what you're trying to achieve, that will come out in the wash, but you got to create a dialogue where those things can be put on the table. All right, let's get into the last section, and I will have a wrap up on this to kind of give you some ideas on how do we implement this. But let's talk about responding to mistakes in a constructive way. I mean, if you think about the pressures that you have on you today to achieve, to please clients, to beat your competition, to stay ahead of the curve, achieve the organizational objectives, there are a lot of pressures. And mistakes can be viewed as a real burden, a bottleneck, a train wreck. So what we have to think about is we got to make sure that we're not reacting as much as we are responding to the mistake. So let's just talk about that a little bit. So and I know this might sound like consultant speak or leadership consultant speak, mistakes as learning opportunities. They are learning opportunities. I guarantee you personally have made more mistakes than you've had successes. And maybe not recently, but over the course of your career, you learn as you go. We learn from our mistakes. Our judgment is developed and shaped. We tell, oh, that's my gut. Well, it's your judgment that comes to play when you're making decisions. Good judgment comes from bad decisions, right? If you think about it. So good decisions come from good judgment, but good judgment comes from bad decisions. So it's a learning, it's a loop, right? So if we're making bad decisions, we do learn from them. So they are learning opportunities for you, for your team, for individuals. Now, how we approach people to learn from those mistakes is kind of the key. So we want to make sure that when we're giving feedback, it truly is constructive. And a lot of that has to do with how your style, how you communicate and provide the feedback. I'm in the midst of a coaching engagement with one of my clients, a particular leader who's doing well, but this person wants to improve, and I'm receiving feedback. I'm doing a 360 on them, and one of the comments was, oh yes, or actually kind of a mix of the comments was, great person, love them, I love working for them. The advice I would give them, though, is when things don't go well or they go wrong, it's not the feedback that bothers me, it's how it is delivered. It comes across as sometimes sarcastic or sometimes with frustration. And yes, I know it can be frustrating. There's no question. We have to ensure that when we are delivering the feedback, it's done in a way that makes sense to the person. They can absorb it, meaning take value from it. So that's really what I'm talking about here. And if you think about, take a situation, and let's say one of your team members makes a bad decision, and your response or reaction is, well, why did you do that? Or why did you make that decision? Instead of asking that question, the why question, ask a what or how question. For instance, what got you to that decision? Hey, what we can see now, it wasn't the best one. But let's learn from this. What got you there? I want to understand your thinking process so that I can help you make better decisions in the future. You're trying to accomplish the same thing, but how you approach it will allow people to open up, meaning they will, in the former, it's why, they'll shut down, put up a wall. The latter is it keeps people open and willing to learn and think. And that's what we want to do. So the leader's role here. So, first of all, be an example for how to handle mistakes, handling your own mistakes, handling others' mistakes. Demonstrate your willingness to not make mistakes as or consider mistakes as catastrophic, unless they are. Sometimes there are catastrophic mistakes. They are rare because we do have checks and balances. But let's make sure that you're the example, that your demeanor, your approach is supportive of what you want to achieve, and then supporting the team resilience and that continuous improvement. And the team resilience, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but the team resilience has everything to do with the ability to get over adversity, and how you manage through that and how you drive towards continuous improvement is very important. So let's just talk about strategies for cultivating that resilience. So, first of all, normalizing failure is important. People have to understand that failure is not a bad thing. We don't want too much of it, but we want to manage it. We want to embrace it. We want to learn from it, right? So we got to encourage reflection and adaptation on all of this. And, this is a learning process. Don't assume people will take, they will learn on their own. A lot of people do. The people who are lifelong learners, self-starters, they'll oftentimes come to you, but a lot of people, they have an ego, and they don't want to they'll let their ego get in the way of learning. They'll deflect, they'll blame, they'll point the finger in different directions. What we have to do is we have to really realize as individuals and as teams, failure is normal. It's how we handle it, right? Let's look at it as a positive. If people see it as an opportunity, they will embrace it and they will learn. If they look at it as a negative, meaning, okay, I made a mistake, black mark against me, I'm done, this is a problem, people hate me. I'm being a little extreme, but that's what we have to think about here is we got to remember that if we normalize it, people will feel okay to talk about it, learn from it, and adapt as needed. And it's especially important when times are challenging. If the economy's rough, or the business isn't growing as fast as it is, people feel antsy. They feel it. They know it. If it's a big project or a big customer or client issue, people are going to feel that pressure. This is where you need to provide that support to make sure that resilience is there, and there is people, like it's an environment where people feel as though they can address and confront their own challenges. All right, so let me do a quick summary here. Actually, before I go back, just one thing. I just looked at my notes here. There's one thing in your approach, right? In your approach to dealing with or cultivating resilience, you have to monitor how you communicate. And this is a subtle point, but most of us don't really do it. Fortunately for me, in my business, I'm on video an awful lot, and I've seen video of myself early on. You don't always like to see yourself in video, but if you do, you can gain a lot of feedback on how you're coming across. Is your body language the right body language to achieve what you want? Is your tone there? So if you're in a moment of frustration or anger, if you're not cognizant, meaning you're not aware of yourself, you might be coming across as, okay, this is a problem, you're a problem, I'm angry with you, I'm frustrated with you. That will not that will not create a good environment for resilience, and it will shut people down. So we just have to be aware of our approach and how we're coming across. And that's not simple, it's not easy. For those of us who are good at the emotional intelligence or the self-awareness, we reflect on it, we look for reactions to see how we're doing. Some of us are not as good at it. So if you are one that is not great at self-reflection or self-awareness, seek feedback. How am I doing? Did that come across well? And I know that might seem like you're putting your ego aside or showing too much vulnerability. You're not. It's a huge trust builder, and it creates an environment where people can say, okay, this person is aware of themselves. I need to be more aware. So just a thought on that. So let me wrap up on the 4 points, and then I'm going to go to the final slide about putting some of this into action. So number one, we want to create an environment where employees feel safe, right? And safe is relative to how each individual feels in the organization. Can they speak up? Can they ask you questions? Will they feel okay? Will they feel less of themselves if they take a risk? And this is where it really is important to make sure people feel safe. Trust, absolute foundation. Just something to remember here as a leader. Most important, people trust and respect you. Number one. They don't have to like you. It's a bonus. And I'm not saying people shouldn't like you. I am saying trust and respect are the greatest importance in your ability to drive people's performance, build strong teams, build an effective organization. Provide a broad range of ideas and solutions, meaning we want to make sure we're getting a diversity of thinking, ideas, that you don't get as much of that as you think you do. If you're good at it, wonderful, fantastic, keep it up. And then finally, mistakes need to be viewed as opportunities, and they are. And I don't want anyone on the call here to confuse what I mean by this. If you are struggling with a particular employee and they're making mistakes over and over again, yeah, you pull them in, one-on-one, a private setting, and you make it crystal clear that we need improvement. This is chronic. We can't have this. It's not about coddling. Grace and accountability can coexist. I borrowed that from a colleague of mine. You can gracefully hold people accountable. And that is something I want you to consider. So let me put some of this into action. And this will be, again, this will be all included in the handout, so you can take this with you. So I think what you need to do, first of all, is assess your current environment and look for those items. Is my environment psychologically safe? And you've got to look for behaviors. You need to look for things that might be, because I gave you this earlier on. Look for the things that might indicate that people don't feel safe. But a great way to do it is in your one-on-ones, as I mentioned. Talk to people, have a dialogue. You can do surveys for your team. You can ask people for anonymous feedback. How are we doing as a team? How do you feel? Now, again, that's up to you. That's a stylistic thing, whether you do it or not. But those who get feedback are the ones that improve. I mean, if you think about all the top athletes in the world, all of them, or think about some of the top golfers in the world, they all have coaches. And how do you stay at the top of your game? You have a coach who's giving you feedback, not to tear you down, but to build you up. So I think this is a good opportunity to understand, is my environment, am I creating the environment that I want or should be creating? If this is not something you've thought about in the past, or have not put into action, I would say start small. Always start small, because if you're going to change your behavior, it's going to change others' behavior. And you want to make sure that you have a feedback loop to say, okay, I'm going to change this. It might be in meetings, you start calling on certain people to get them to open up. Is that working? Oh no, I've shut them down. I've come on too strong. That could be happening. So start slowly, look for opportunity to get people to speak up, to share their ideas. And if you do that consistently over time, you will build an environment that you want to. And the second point under start small, create safe spaces for honest conversations. Sometimes it's in a group setting. You've got to be careful, because someone might come out with the stupidest idea on the planet. What you don't want to say is, that's the stupidest idea on the planet. What you want to say is, well, let's talk about that a little bit. And there's always goodness, something good in any idea. It's making sure people feel okay about speaking up. And I've seen leaders do it. Someone opens their mouth who's reluctant because it's just not their style. And the leader handles the idea, the comment, the wrong way. You don't want to shut people down. The third item here in terms of putting psychological safety into action is modeling the behavior yourself. Okay, so as a leader, you've got to set the tone. And if you think about what you do every single day around how you communicate, how you might be vulnerable yourself, meaning taking the blow for, no, that was on me. If you're protecting someone or protecting the team from some bigger catastrophe in the organization, what we want to do is you want to lead. You want to lead yourself as the leader of the team to say, this is my team. This is our strategy. We're executing the best way we can. If there are mistakes, it is not one person. It is my responsibility to ensure this is working. And this way, people on the team are willing to take more, greater calculated risks, make their own decisions, push the envelope where they need to, so that you get the most out of them. So it's very important that, you're sharing your own experiences. You've made mistakes in the past, right? I guarantee it. You've probably made some big ones and a lot of small ones. We've all made them. Organizations who value diversity in thinking, new ideas, they allow those mistakes to occur, and they don't. There's no major fallout. Now, obviously, if something's catastrophic, yeah, that's different. And if it's a complete neglect, that's different. Sometimes people get fired for doing really bad things, but most people don't. Most organizations say, okay, here it is, and let's deal with it. Let's learn from this. A great example of a company going through that right now is Boeing. They've had some real challenges. They're in the news today. The employees are going on strike. They went on strike at midnight last night. It's a big deal, and it's one of the biggest companies in the world. Obviously, one of two major aircraft manufacturers. It's an American brand. Wow, what a shame that it got to where it is. But it doesn't mean it can't fix it, and it's going to. So it's going to go through a challenge now to get through this. A lot of people made mistakes along the way. They have to learn from it. So that's something to consider. And then the final point here is commit to continuous improvement. And I know continuous improvement falls into the category of lean manufacturing, and we always need to be getting better. Without that, we can stagnate and we can become complacent. The quickest way to failure is through complacency. We're good enough. This is the way we've always done it. We don't need to change. We don't need to advance. We don't need to think differently about how we go forward. It's not about making wholesale changes about how you do things, but it's being committed to the fact that we always need to continue to improve along the way. There are companies that have made some major wholesale changes in time. Today, if we think about Intel, right? Intel is struggling right now. They used to be at the top of the pack. They're struggling right now a little bit. NVIDIA's come in and they're killing it. There's lots of different things going on there, but if you go way, way back in Intel's history, they didn't do microprocessors. They did memory for computers. And they made a shift. I forget what year it is. It goes way back. But they made a shift to say, this is a commodity business, memory. And you can see it is today. It's a commodity business. We can see it going that direction. We need to move into microprocessors where we can innovate and come up with new products and new ideas. And they moved in that direction. There was almost an overnight, in relative terms, an overnight action. So that was a major shift, but it wasn't about how they did it. It was just their focus on the business. And they had to continue to improve along the way about how they did, how they sell, how they market, how they manufacture, how they innovate. Those are the things we have to continually think about. And in that, we've got to make sure that we're always looking at our strategies. Companies today, every company has a mission, vision, values, goals, objectives, maybe for the year or 5-year plan. Those may not change a whole lot. It's your strategies, how you execute, how you do it, how you get there. Are we effectively executing against our strategy? It could be a strategy for a team. It could be a sales strategy. It could be a production strategy. Having the strategy or having the plan is important. The strategies within the plan, you say, oh, we're not getting there. We need to adjust this. We need to change this. And most of the time, it's not, like I said earlier, wholesale changes. It's adjustments of the dials to ensure you're moving towards those results and objectives that you set out to achieve. All right. I'm going to, I'll leave this up. Lori, I know we have 5 minutes left. Are there any questions that you can share with me that I can answer?
Yes, we had a couple of questions come through, and one of them you've sort of touched on, but I'll read it anyway. And that is, sure. I have a member of my team who consistently makes suggestions that are not good or well-timed. How can I address this person's concerns without shutting them down?
Okay. Yeah, good. Well, first of all, I would say do not embarrass them in a public setting. I think it's important, and I've seen this happen, and maybe out of frustration because there's a lot of comments that are out of alignment. Obviously, and I'm going to say this, I don't know all the particulars, but I'm assuming this employee's intention is good. They're trying to add value. They're trying to be relevant. They want to be part of improvement. So that's a good thing. And that's why you don't want to shut them down. So we don't want to call them out in a public setting, meaning in a group setting, but we do want to pull them aside and try to figure out why are their suggestions out of alignment with what is best to achieve the outcomes that we're setting out to achieve? Why, what's going on? What's at the root of that? There could be too much ambiguity in their thinking. They may not be clear on what the goals and objectives are, or something relative to their role. I think it's really important to pull them aside and say, hey, look, you've been great at sharing your thoughts and ideas. A lot of them just don't align with what we're trying to achieve. Let me explain that. Let me show you why and how. So, we always have to go to the root cause. We don't want to assume the person's being they're being difficult or they're trying to be obnoxious. It really has a lot to do with, do they understand? Are they truly aligned with the mission? Are they truly aligned with the goals and objectives? Do they see it the way you're trying to shape it? So I would start there and see how they respond beyond that. And as they continue to share their ideas and keep them on track, when they're sharing, it's always good to call out, I would say, the positives, those things that align, like find the goodness in what people share. In my world, when I'm training people, I ask for a lot of input. I want it to be interactive. And sometimes I'll get comments or ideas that are just, they're out in left field, but there's always a nugget of something good there that I can say, okay, yeah, let's talk about that piece of it. I don't say this is 90% of it's crap. I focus on the 10% because I'm in a public forum. I want them to feel good. I want that person to continue to speak up and engage. And if I can encourage them to speak about the things that are relevant and positive, that's what I want to encourage them to do. Any other questions?
Yes, another question here is, I am a manager, but not senior management. How do I emphasize the importance of psychological safety to my superiors?
You might want to avoid the term psychological safety because that might someone might say, what the heck is that? I use the term because like I said, I read an article about it. I thought it was really interesting. I would avoid that and really talk more about things like, hey, I want to encourage innovation. I want to encourage people to feel more engaged, or employee engagement, some terms that are more organizationally or socially acceptable. I don't think psychological safety is a bad thing, but if you're trying to manage up and get them to think about that, is how do we do that? How do we make sure that our people feel involved, they feel part of the success, that they're, we want to engage them, we want them to feel more committed. I think you start with that and talk about, again, if you're managing up, talk about how you're doing it and demonstrate it yourself. I know it's not simple managing up because there's certainly ideas tend to come down, but managing up is important. And I think speak to the fundamentals, or speak to the desired outcomes of what psychological safety gets you, so that it will be received. You always have to know your audience, right? You're trying to engage your audience. Speak in their language, or speak in terms of successes and outcomes and desires.
Very good. One more question up here, and then anybody else feel free to speak up. And that is, how do I address an employee's baggage from a past position where they did not feel, where they did not feel comfortable speaking up?
Okay. We're at the 10 o'clock hour. I'll make this fast. So people do bring their past luggage with them, their past experiences with them, and people are conditioned by the environment they're in. It's not an easy one, because you can't just turn around to someone and say, hey, look, speak up, share your thoughts and ideas. If they've been conditioned from their past environment, I would love to say there's a quick fix to that. There is not, because and some of it's going to be stylistic, meaning people's tendencies. You're going to have to, very similar to what I've been talking about, starting small, right? You've got to, with this individual, feel them out, see how they do, test them a little bit. I wish it were a quick fix, but it just isn't. And I think the more you demonstrate that, the stronger your culture is around psychological safety, the more they will become reconditioned to get the behavior that you want from them. So I wish, like I said, hey, would love that light switch solution, but there isn't in that case.
All right,
Is
we
that
are at 10 o'clock, so.
all right? Thank you, everybody. I do appreciate your time. I hope you have a great Friday weekend.